Okay, good morning. This is Athena StarSeed. I have a wonderful, amazing being, friend, cosmic playmate, teacher, and also just being of light, who I'm interviewing today on this wonderful book I just finished reading yesterday. So powerful, called You Are Love: Awakening to Your True Self. So Prasad Paul Duffy is the author, and I just wanted to invite him to share a little bit about how he came to know this information.
Well, we don't want to talk about what the information is first.
Yes, go ahead. We can introduce that, but I do want to know your biography and how you came to
Yeah,
be.
it was because the way you asked the question, how I came to that information versus my biography, you know what I mean? So I didn't know quite how to answer it because what comes to me when you say how I came to that information is it is passed down to me from my teacher, Papaji, and it was passed down to him from his teacher, Sri Ramana Maharshi, both who lived in India in the 20th century. And it's a universal truth that Ramana Maharshi received from the mountain, which represents Shiva, the sacred mountain called Arunanchala in southern India. And that represents Shiva. So you could say that's how I came upon the information through that lineage. Yet at the same time, it's what we all know already. And that's the basic teaching of my teacher, Papaji, is call up the search, for you are already that which you seek. And so 25 years ago, when I heard that message, it allowed me to stop pursuing a spiritual path, finding, searching for the answer to life, the meaning of life, trying to transcend the suffering of my ego. Stop all pursuit, all searching, and just simply kept, would say, I learned to be still. And it's in that stillness that my true self revealed itself. And so I have a personality and a body like everybody else. I just don't identify with it as who I am anymore.
Well, there are many of us right now going through an identity crisis. We've all been in quarantine for so many months now with the COVID, and a lot of people are using it as a sanctuary to retreat and get to know themselves better. And other people are drowning in their own loneliness, and they are controlled by their desires, and they're incredibly upset, and they're angry, and it's coming out in our political arena. And how can this book help anybody that actually is feeling a lot of those, contractions and anxiety right now?
Well, first of all, I love that you acknowledge that the potential for this COVID lockdown and social distancing, etc., can allow people, if they use it consciously, to as a retreat and to rethink their lives, to reprioritize their intentions. I did it here in Costa Rica, and I dropped deeper into the self and less interested in the external plane, the outer world, and more focused on the source, the self. So the book is a journey of getting to know the self, loving the self, and then realizing who you are as the self, who the self is. You could call it love. That's one word to describe it. But I would like to ask you, what would you say, having read the book, can be derived from someone reading it to help them during this time of challenging conditions?
Well, I'm going to say something that might shock you a little bit, but I felt a transmission from the information that transcended my mind to even think about it. I feel more peaceful and I feel emptier. Now, some of the things that unlocked me was when you took the true self with the false self and you compared them to each other. And as I was reading that, it started opening and opening, and I felt more light coming in, and I felt more spaciousness. And so I don't know. The main thing for me was I want to share this quote. This is in chapter 6. It says, if the mind is the dominion of the false self, then the heart, which is no mind, is the dominion of the true self. So, becoming the witness of your thoughts, you can detach from your false self. And in this way, we can transcend the part of ourselves that believes itself to be separate from the rest of the world we perceive. So now you're playing with the perceiver and the perceived, the one who's looking at the mirror and the mirror. And then something happened, I don't know, around chapter 14, 15, 16. I mean,
It is a transmission. The transmission came through me in the jungles of Thailand, where I initially wrote it in 2.5 weeks. It just came through me. And then I spent the last year living here in Costa Rica, attending to it every few months, just, doing what we call as writers in Hollywood, a pass. And in this case, it would just be editing it and taking out whatever wasn't specific to the subject. And some of those other chapters ended up as blogs on my website. But so it was channeled through me. So there is a transmission. And really, I'm so glad to hear you say that. The
well,
books that interest me the most when I was are books that have not about the information on the pages. It's about when you read the words, what happens within your own consciousness. So the transmission isn't even from outside of you because there is no outside. So one of the themes of the book, as you know, is non-duality. Okay, so that I learned in India from Papaji. It's a sacred teaching, and it basically means oneness. And even yoga means union, which is oneness. So non-duality is the realization that there are no two, that there's only one, and the appearance of two. So that's why I use the mirror as the metaphor in the book. I even say, it's like you can't see your own eyes without a mirror. As beautiful as they may be, you can't see them without a mirror or, a camera angle photographing you, but that's a mirror. It's outside of you looking in. And that's what all the mirrors are. All the people you see in your life are mirrors. They're mirroring back to you who you are. And it comes through the filters of your own mind based on who you think they are. So it is an old saying, who you think someone else is says a lot more about you than it does them. Right? So one of the chapters is called The Mirror of Relationships. So when you understand non-duality, which I explain in the book in more depth, then you understand the relationship of the mirror. Like you and I are real mirror. I mean, are accurate mirrors. What's the word I'm looking for? Close mirrors? What would you say? We're identical mirrors? Not quite identical. But, so it's easy to embrace someone who mirrors something in you that you admire or appreciate. But then there are those mirrors who we judge because we're judging or repressing that part of ourselves. And those mirrors have a lot to teach us as well. So in non-duality, everything is seen as a mirror. And as you mentioned before, the observer and the observed, the perceiver and the perceived is now seen as one. It's not two. So everything you see in your life is a mirror of your consciousness. So that means it's all reflecting back to you from your own consciousness, right? You got that, obviously.
Yes, I got that from a lot of solitude. And
Yes.
so I was so excited that you wrote this book specifically during this time, because as you know, I do soul readings, and I have a lot of my clients that I've been recommending this book to specifically for number two, chapter two, looking for love in all the wrong places. Many of the beings that call me and interface with me are stumbling on a second chakra. Where's my love? How come they can't show me who I am through their love, and I can't reach fulfillment unless somebody outside of me loves me? So let's go into that. That's a big one.
Yes. And especially since, that's the first section of the book. It's like the foundation of how to stop identifying with your ego, right? As we talked earlier. And it's because the ego, when they're looking for love outside themselves, it's like a life or death situation. It's survival. I go into that of what it really means to the subconscious. I go into that in the book. But the idea that someone is separate from you and then you need their approval and then you don't get their approval and then you suffer or you lose their approval, all of that I had to deal with that in the first third of the book. And I hope some readers who have already transcended this will enjoy it kind of in retrospect. But other readers who are going through it, like your clients, should really take their time with it. There are processes to do in it, like forgiveness process, and to really kind of use the book as a launching pad of your own processes. I know you after finishing a chapter.
Wait, read that again.
And
Say that
so it's
again.
designed to help people say what?
You cut out. Say that again. After
Oh, I
each
said
chapter.
that, yeah, that you would call me after reading a chapter and discuss those first section of chapters. It's really, no matter where you are in your life, you can use those chapters as a way to stop identifying with your story. For some people, it'll be an eye opener for the first time, and others like you and I, it's a way of taking inventory and saying, do I really need to approach the world this way? Is this just a habit? Is that my personality? I know, I'll tell you, I don't write about this in the book, but when I was in India, this last time, I was there 25 years ago. That's when I became Prasad and met Papaji and all of that. But I went back last year to the holy mountain, Arunachala, and it's very intense energy. And you do a lot of burning of your ego. And something rose in me that was like, I think it had developed in Hollywood and New York. It was this judging mind, not judging like this is good and bad, more judging like this is high quality, this is high standard, this is art, this is well done, well written, well performed. You know what I mean? How would you describe it? It's not judging, saying that those that aren't are bad. It's saying that I want to excel to that everything around me should be at a certain level of perfection, beauty, elegance, but really more than anything, conscious, like the server is conscious of their job, the taxi driver's conscious, you know? And I would see it falling short of this random standard that I had in my mind. And it wasn't a pleasant experience. And so I came to Costa Rica, and that critical thinker traveled with me, and I finally let it go here. in Costa Rica because the people are so sweet, first of all. And it's unnecessary. During these times, again, anyone listening to this, you can look at equality in your life and you can revamp it, you can rewrite it, you can restructure it. You're not stuck being the same person for your whole life. I constantly reinvent myself. You too, Athena?
Yeah, and it leads me to chapter 3, which is survival masks of personality. And I just want to pop in there. So I, like Prasad, love acting and performing, and I was a theater major in college, and we were taught to critique a scene. That was part of our skill set, is we had to come out of the scene, critique the scene, and go back into the scene. And we had to put on these different masks, these different roles. And I remember the professor saying, don't judge the character, like Richard III, or I always thought Hamlet was wimpy. And I was like, whoa. And so I like the way you go into the survival mask of personality.
Yes, those, I came up with that in the mid 80s when I co-wrote a book with my teacher at the time that Simon and Schuster published. And so I developed that over the years working with clients, and I brought it back for this book only because, I could almost say that it wasn't even part of the channeled material. I kind of brought it in and then developed it over the last year, just that chapter. There's a lot more masks that I didn't include that I asked people to look for themselves. But the purpose of that device is to see that if I'm a kind person or a demanding person or a fearful person, judging person, whatever types and then subtypes go along with that personality type, we begin to see that it's just a mask we're wearing in order to gain approval or survive. It's our subconscious defense mechanisms showing up in a way that we got attention as from our parents and from our authority figures as a child. And then we wear these masks. Well, many people think they are the personality, what I call the mask. So I call the personality the mask so that people can have a sense that they can take it off. Underneath, who am I underneath? Okay. So there's no judgment though as personality types. And when you wake up, it doesn't really matter what mask you wear. That's not the issue. It's whether it's a mask or not.
Well, something funny is that doing mask work, literally doing mask work, where you don't talk and you put masks on and then your body shifts and you do things. I was very familiar with the mask. And even though I was familiar, I came out to Hollywood. I created a persona. I marketed the persona. And after living in that archetype that I created as a fictional character, the Master Chief, I got lost in the illusion. And then it was hard to blend back into who I was behind the archetype and who I am behind
It's
Athena,
very hard.
who I am behind Tina.
Yeah. So Tina was the boot camp lady, but we get even the roles we play, like your role as a mother. That's a role, I didn't even touch that in the book, but that's a role that people heavily identify with. It's biological on a physical level, it's emotional, hormonal level, but it's just another role. When you are letting go of identities, you even let go of your identity as mother, daughter, sister, friend, and you begin to, one of the chapters in there is the freedom to be nobody. I'm jumping ahead, but it's okay. And we didn't mention that chapter 6 is embracing your solitude. So that's, as you mentioned, it's the doorway to all of this work. But ultimately, we get to a point where we realize we're not the personality, we're not the mind with all of its conditioning. Well, then who am I? Chapter 9, who am I? Self-inquiry, which I learned from Ramana Maharshi and Papaji. And then it kind of evolved in Prasad's own style for himself. And he shares that with people he teaches, but people can find their own way. It's simply inquiring, who am I? And letting the I thought fall back to the source from which it rose. So, for instance, you'd be like, oh, I'm hungry. And you get distracted. Suddenly you can't focus on your task at hand because your body is taking over with the hunger signs. And you could simply ask, well, who's hungry? I am. Well, who am I? And that I thought that's activating the or falling, into the desire of hunger falls away. And then you just witness hunger and then you eat whenever you eat. And that's just one simple way, but basic way of how the body manipulates the mind and then manipulates our attention or our focus. It can be sex, it can be career, any desire. And that takes the focus outside of the self, of pure consciousness, into an object of desire. And then the whole world becomes about that, whether you get it or not get it. And in the case of the book, we're using relationship as the metaphor for that.
And speaking of that, chapter 5 was extremely delicious because trying to love yourself through another. Now, most of the people, not all of them, but most of them do not come to me and say, I want enlightenment. I just want to be one with God. They say, I want to be one with Mary or Jerry. And there's a lot of suffering attached to the virus that we've been programmed with, the love fairy tale that Disney has sewn into most of our heart chakras. And so trying to love yourself through another, talk a little bit about why that is a setup for a big fall.
Well, before I do that, when your clients say, I don't want to be one with God, I want to be one with Jerry or whoever their love interest is, what do you say to them?
No, they don't say, I don't want to be enlightened. I'm just witnessing they don't call me to crave the light. Like when I'm calling you and I'm
So I
talking to you.
understood you, yes, but you
Yeah.
said what they do crave is to be one with Jerry or whoever their love interest is. That's what you said, right?
Yeah.
So you learn God is the direct connection to love. And we're trying to love ourselves, like chapter 5 says. And when we begin to see that the love that we're seeking is our very own self, is within us, as Rumi said, the 13th century Persian poet, the love you are seeking is seeking you. So the journey to love yourself involves learning to love another and learning to receive their love from another. And I do go over that in the early chapters for sure, including the one you're referring to. But ultimately, you discover that love comes and goes. The person comes and goes. The attitude of love comes and goes. What love is eternal? What love does not come and go? And so I begin to differentiate in one of the chapters between personal and impersonal love. So when you realize I suffer too much trying to love myself through another, you begin to desire to love yourself. So I use the instruction of impersonal love and personal love to differentiate, as you said earlier, true self and false self. So the book is really simple in that way, and it's not within duality, true self, false self. It's the false self is the sheath or the covering of the true self. It's the clouds in front of the sun. The clouds are not the opposite of the sun. So the false self is not the opposite of the true self. The false self are thought, mind, program, past, time, desire, okay, all the domain of the name, which then emotions like fear, shame, unworthiness, jealousy, all of that are emotions of the false self, the limited self who feels separate from all that is. That's personal love. So already, when you're in personal love, you're with you're wearing one of the survival masks. It just goes with it. They go together. That's being the survival mask is the person who is having the personal love experience. So everyone's welcome to try that this lifetime on Earth because that's one of the reasons we're here on Earth to do that. And there's love stories that pay homage to it. But after a while, you realize what I'm actually looking for is not the love from outside of me, but the love within me. And that's what you called earlier God's love. So sometimes people go for it right away. Sometimes people think God is outside themselves and now they're in the same situation, the same setup. And I write about that as well. But when you realize that God is the self and love is within us, and it's always here, call off the search, you are already that which you seek, then I basically just applied the spiritual truths that my teacher told me about enlightenment to relationship. That's what I've done with this book. Because Prasad never was successful in a long term relationship. And I've had many, many love affairs and many delicious lifelong friendships that still exist. And my family is very loving family. We love each other a lot. So, I have plenty of love in my life in terms of relationships, but I never really um, went for the let's get married and spend the rest of our lives together with one person. That just wasn't my way. And so part of what I talk about in the early part of the book is helping people accept if they're single, right? There's no shame in being single. Just because a lot of people are in couples and procreating the species. So, right, that's in the early chapters as well. So I hope that somebody, even if they don't have a spiritual awakening, which you really can't help it when if you read the whole book, right? I mean, but even if they don't, and they just learn to accept their life as it is, that they're not currently with a partner, that will bring such peace to their life. And then a partner can come. I write about that at the end. Once the awakening happens, you can attract a partner, or a playmate. You said cosmic playmate. I laugh, and we have a lot of cosmic playmates, and we are each that for each other. But we know we are one.
I want to
We
talk about, I would like to talk about your beautiful analogy about the screen is impermanent. The screen stays and the movie changes. So when the screen catches on, when there was a fire in the movie, the screen doesn't burn. When there's drama on the movie, the screen doesn't know the drama because it goes back to the blank white screen. And you're a filmmaker. And I like that you use that analogy. Let's go into that a little bit.
Well, I have to acknowledge as a filmmaker that analogy comes from Ramana Maharshi. So that's like 80 years ago. He died. So that was over 100 years ago. He said that, and then I think Papaji used it in a couple times, and many people in the non-dual Advaita Vedanta, maybe even Ramana heard it from sacred scripture, but he upgraded it to the movies. Charlie Chaplin was a big hit back then, and movies were brand new for people. The cinema, you go on the screen and it just looks real, you believe it. Most people, when they watch Netflix today, they know it's a movie. They may get emotionally engaged, but they're watching it on their screen, computer screen, or a cell phone. They're not engaged quite in the same way. So when Ramana used that metaphor, movies seemed real. They were larger than life. And then he used that to say that's life, but who we are is the screen of awareness that's untouched by life. It's untouched by the bombs and the bullets and the love affairs. It just remains the same, eternal. So for some people, they want to be the movie, the constantly ever changing ups and downs, drama, comedy of life. And then others of us, we've had enough of that. and we've been driven inward to simply abide as the screen. It doesn't mean the movie stops playing. It means we're simply watching it from the neutral place of the screen. And if there's any emotional reaction, that's really seen as part of the movie.
In chapter 12, you talk about life is but a dream. Is that the film, The Dream? Is it The Dream?
Yes, exactly. You know, the second half of the book, I use a lot of metaphors to describe that which can't really be known with the mind. But life is a dream, that is called Maya in India. Again, Ramana Maharshi direct, it's almost like I'm simply translating some of his concepts for a contemporary audience, but not before they had an impact on Prasad. It's not like I'm just parroting these. These are all things that I've practiced and learned and in some cases mastered within my own life as a way to keep quiet and stay connected with God and be love and share love. And so, which was the chapter that?
Life is but a dream is
Oh yeah,
chapter
the life is but a
12.
dream. So yeah, so that's the ancient metaphor of India as well. You know, Maya that we created through our consciousness. But what's interesting is when I was a young man, I also learned about how consciousness creates reality through thoughts. So the people in India, most of them, when you wake up, you know, a lot of the masters, they just teach you how to come back to emptiness, the Buddha as well. And in emptiness, you just abide and watch life happen and unfold and watch the watcher. But I have also seen how if we shift a thought, then the reality, the mirror of consciousness changes. So sometimes you can do it consciously, sometimes it happens by itself, but continue to watch that. And you don't have to, like in that movie, The Secret, the book, The Secret, you know, that new age metaphysical law of attraction, which I do refer to briefly in my book, The Law of Attraction. You don't do it with your mind, like attracts like. No, you hold space from your awareness, from consciousness, and allow it to unfold in choiceless awareness. Know life is a dream. You don't have to worry so much. And so it shifts from fear and anxiety to peace and love and adventure.
So when you know that you're a dream character in your own dream, you know, you have a chapter also that talks about your life story. You know, what is the purpose of this incarnation if we're still in the dream?
Well, you know, I don't get into purpose as much, and there's lots of teachers who do, but the purpose is for the ego. It's for the survival mask. There is no purpose for God. Um, God is in these incarnations of all these millions of humans and other life forms, animals and creatures. God's incarnate in all of it to experience life on Earth, just like many other planets around the multi-universes are also being experienced, and all the alternate realities and probable realities is also all being experienced, and each one is a point of awareness. And God is in each point of awareness. And the point of awareness thinks it's a wave. Here's another metaphor from Ramana that I didn't put in my book, but another famous one. The wave thinks it's separate from the ocean, but at no point is the wave not the ocean. The wave and the ocean are always one, but when the wave rises, it feels separate from the ocean. So that's what the story is, my love, just thinking you're separate. And then you have a whole thing. And some people, you know, won't even like hearing what I'm saying. They want to be in their story and enjoy their incarnation as humans. Some of them are awake. They've had a teacher, read a book, or did some medicinal psychedelic medicine, you know, plant medicine, and they've had a glimpse of what I'm pointing to. But I'm not saying don't live the dream. I'm saying know that it's a dream while you're living it is a lot more fun than thinking it's real. Because when you're having a nightmare and you believe it's real, it's terrifying until you wake up. So that's the invitation that I'm giving people, and especially through this book, is to wake up. Life is much more than you realize. You've been seeing it from a limited perspective based on your own past conditioning. When we drop our past conditioning, the expansive awareness that we all are is revealed. And that's what guides us. That's where we draw our wisdom and our love from and our connection.
Does it matter what we do? Does it matter if somebody wants to go out and drink or smoke cigarettes, or, does our behavior matter if we're in a dream?
No. And I love that you said if we're in the dream, so it qualifies it for people listening, but it is all the dream. So no, behavior doesn't matter. I'll never forget in India my first time when I realized in the emptiness of now that nothing matters. I
Now,
was in the Ganga. I was in the Ganga River. I was like, nothing matters. But my mind, just for fun, added, but everything counts.
okay, now talk about that, because in
So
yoga, I'm studying yoga as a yoga teacher training, and they're teaching us the yamas and the niyamas as a purification process. And Papa G says you can't purify the mind with the mind. You can't purify the soul with the body with yoga. It's like dust clearing dust off of a mirror. You have to clear the mirror. So how do you matter and then count? Not matter and then count.
So nothing matters is the absolute truth. Okay, that's call that the true self or the impersonal truth, like impersonal love. So the absolute truth is that nothing matters. You could say it's the vertical path. But on the horizontal path, which is the relative world, which is the dream world, everything counts. Every moment is equal to the next, even if the mind thinks it isn't, it is. If you bring your awareness, that's what Eckhart Tolle means by the power of now. There you go. You don't even need to read the book. It's in if you your attention to now with a complete of it, like it's the best moment ever, that's it. And Krishnamurti would teach choiceless awareness, which I refer to in my book, which is basically accepting every moment as it is. So if you accept every moment as it is and embrace it as like the best moment ever, that's it. Because only the mind tells you this moment's better than that. This person's better than that. Being with someone's better than being alone. Having money's better than not having money. Those are all just BS belief systems of the mind that are telling you the lie of the mind. And so if your point of awareness believes it, that will be your reality. That's how we create our reality, through our thoughts. If you don't believe it and you keep quiet and rest in emptiness, then the clouds are no longer obscuring the sun and you can see the sun clearly. I can see clearly now, the rain has gone. And it has, it cleared up today. It was raining. And so that's really what waking up feels like. It's through witnessing your mind and letting go the layers and layers of beliefs and thoughts until you come to nothingness. And in that nothingness, nothing matters. You keep your attention on nothing. That's why nothing matters. And when you keep your attention on nothing, then your awareness is clear to see truth, to be truth, to speak truth, right? You know what I'm talking about.
Yes, but for those people who do not have any idea what you're talking about, can we just go back to India for a moment? Okay, now you were in a film with Eckhart Tolle about 25 years ago. I watched it. It was very good. You had an encounter with a master named Papa G. Something happened and you saw either a flash of light, but you came out different. And when people sat with you, they felt similar to what you felt in the presence of Papa G. What is that? Can you describe it for us?
You could call it grace, light, for sure, light. What happened was I was trying to get Papa G to look at me because I had met one of his disciples when I first arrived in Lucknow, where they lived. And he looked at me, and these two beams of silver light came out of his eyes into mine. Now it's just phenomenon. And now I don't chase phenomenon at all. It's just to get your attention, you know? When people talk about chasing phenomenon, I don't really have much patience for that. But this was 25 years ago. But let me just say that when phenomenon happens, it's really just to get your attention. Okay, so look what's creating the phenomenon. Like that story of the mystic and the philosopher who were lost in the jungle at night. At one point, the lightning strikes. Well, the philosopher looked up at the beauty of the lightning, but the mystic used the light by looking down to find the path. So phenomenon is a way to point you. I just see it. I see it here in Costa Rica too, with the young millennials I'm working with here and living with, and they get very kind of infatuated with the phenomena, the psychic phenomena, as if it's somehow more real than the other dreamland. That's 3D reality. Driving in your car, going to work, blah blah blah, and it's all, as long as it's external, it's all the movie, it's all the dream. By the way, another metaphor I use in the book for those who are in the 21st century, like Ramana was talking about movies from 100 years ago, I talk about video games and virtual reality. And so that's another metaphor. We are the coder and the player and the avatar all at the same time. That's for the video game players. So it's beginning to wake up and realize not just that I am the source of all that is, but also witnessing how that affects the individual expression of it as your personality and your body mind. Okay, so I'm not telling people to wipe it out and not play their character. No, you play your character, but from awakened state where you've created the character, you're free of the demands of the character and the character. You're simply witnessing and choiceless awareness and watching it all unfold until you make a choice. And when you make a choice, that's fun too, because that's what life is. It's choice, and karma comes from choice, of course. When you make a choice, the consequence comes. So some people, when they're deeply spiritual, they try to live in choiceless awareness so that they're not taking on karma. But that's just a belief system as well. So I'm not pushing that on anybody. I'm just sharing a kind of Indian perspective.
You know, you know what I think about. You and I both have watched Peaceful Warrior, the movie with Nick Nolte, and after the kid becomes a certain level of awakeness, Socrates takes him to a bar, and when he's not supposed to be drinking, having sex, or eating meat, right? And he finally adheres to that, and he gets a certain level of fitness up, and then he takes him out to smoke a cigar and take a drink. And so the kid says to him, "You're testing me. We're better than that." And he goes, "Oh, we're better than people now because we know something." And he goes, "Okay, we're not better than people." "No, you're not better and you're not worse." And he drinks. And then the next scene is he's throwing up and they get mugged in a back alley. And he's just like, as long as you're accountable to the choices that you make and you accept them as, the outcome, you can also step away from that. But there are causes and effects. It's either to do or not to do, but accepting it as isness and not judging it or yourself.
But for yourself or those watching right now, you could just look and see, when's the last big choice I made and how did it change my life? And life coaches, which there are a plethora of nowadays, are really coaching people how to make the decision, how to make a choice. I'm sure people who call you for your advice are asking how to make a decision or a choice. And my advice to them is to not make a choice. If you don't have a strong choice within you, a clarity that this is the right way to go, or this is what I, really feel connected to, I even believe maybe that it'll make you happy or something, but that's a lie. But if you make that choice from your gut and you know it to be true, that's great. But if you're floundering and you're not sure, then I say just wait. Let the choice make itself. Then you're watching. And if you're forced to make a choice, even then, I'm not saying giving away your power, but I am saying surrendering the sense of that we even have a choice. Because the mind, if you're choosing from the mind, it's the same choice over and over again, maybe in different packaging. But if you don't make a choice and you just keep quiet, be still, and don't make a choice in that moment, especially if it's an important life choice, then it will be made for you and it will become easy. Then you respond to the choice. Like, I wanted to see the turtles, okay? They are active in giving, planting the eggs in the sand, all the mother turtles. They do it once a month, but in the rainy season, which is September, October, November, they are plentiful. They're more than usual. And the last 2 months, I missed it because I was depending on friends to go with because I don't have a car. And then I was ready to just let it go because you don't want to be attached to anything happen. That's the problem with making choices. Then the attachment comes. And then if it doesn't work out the way you thought, now there's suffering. And I talk about this in the book. But I finally did make a choice somehow. No, I surrendered it. Okay, I guess I won't see it. I'll see it next time because nobody wanted to go with me. But then I found myself in the center of town, and there was the guy who had the ATV that I could rent, and it all just kind of showed up. And I was like, oh, yeah, can I rent the ATV? I want to go to the turtles. And then I went, and it was effortless to get there. And my mind wasn't sure how to get there, but we figured it out yesterday. And then when we went at 4 a.m. in the dark on the ATV across the rivers, it was an exciting adventure. That part wasn't even expected. That's what I'm trying to say. When you don't make the choice, it's better than what you can imagine. And then when I got to the turtles, I had imagined it, of course. That was a choice I made. But then I surrendered to how we show up. And again, it was beyond your imagination. So the survival masks and the false self they need to manipulate everything. They need to have it a certain way to feel good and eat for certain food and be with a certain people. But when we surrender that and say, no, I'm not that. I don't know who I am. I'm nobody. I'm just going to keep quiet in the stillness. Then the true self reveals itself to everyone in each in your own way. No teacher has to tell you who the true self is. The true self reveals itself to you. The teacher's job is to help you remove the ignorance. That's what guru means, remover of ignorance, meaning the shadow that's over the light. You just remove the darkness and the light is already there.
I feel most people can identify with the experience of going on vacation and not having a plan and then getting carried by the flow, which I like to call grace.
That's it.
So sometimes people can flow and fall into the flow of grace when their plans don't work out, right? And some people cannot have a plan and just accept the flow as isness. Are you experiencing that on a 24-hour basis because you're in Costa Rica?
Yes, for sure. And then there's the third kind of people who go on a vacation and they plan their itinerary so tightly that they've spent, so much money on that 2 weeks vacation that they feel a stress to have a good time. And they fight with each other. And I've seen it with my family. And, I've been that way in the past. And so I think traveling the way I do is different than going on vacation. Traveling is moving from place to place to experience the culture and the nature of a particular geographic zone. I usually stay up to a year in the place, definitely for months. because I want to just feel what it feels like to live here. And in that space, it's just as you said, there's no expectation, there's nothing to do, there's nowhere to go. And it sounds like oh wow, that's wonderful, I'd love to do that. Or it sounds like dropping out in the 60s, with the hippies. But it's actually much more challenging than most people would allow themselves to approach, because you have to be still to not let your mind get distracted by technology, responsibility, um, the idea of missing out. I talk about all this in the book, even FOMO, right? When you look at social media,
Do FOMO.
FOMO, fear of missing out. And so I don't think that any of that socializing is bad, even social media, but to the degree that people are addicted to it, and that I was, that's too much. So again, let's come back to the lockdown allowed people to, and losing their jobs, which is still continuing, allows people to reevaluate their life. And maybe some will read the book at this time, and or have other spiritual practices that will allow them to transform their life, because what's coming could be very challenging to the ego who's afraid. There's a lot, it's been a stressful 2020, but this could be the beginning of a new normal, is what they say. It's a different kind of survival mask.
Well, I would say too, it's in theater we used to have to do those trust falls,
Yes.
right? So a big trust fall into the arms of the universe, since in this book you talk about the universe being the mirror and you being the witnessing the universe, and then the two merging into each other. Um, that's ultimately what is underneath all of it anyway. So do we pull the Band-Aid off slowly and scream and suffer the whole way, or do we pull it off quickly, or do
What
we
is
let
the
it fall
Band-Aid?
off? The
What is the
Band-Aid
Band-Aid
the Band-Aid
metaphor?
is our attachment to soothing our ego. The money, the security, the relationship, the identity, the being somebody. Will my parents love me if I do all these things? Will my boyfriend or girlfriend love me if I prove to them?
Which is all the false self, which is all ego, right? And there may be somewhere who is completely free of this and blissed out 24/7. The rest of us, we are still operating within the dream, with our dream body, and that's okay. It's just the non-attachment to that identity, the non-attachment to the identity's desires being fulfilled. That kind of surrender is what you're pointing to, and that's freedom. So do you rip it off quickly, or do you do it slowly? The slow way is meditation, yoga, therapy, groups, men's groups, women's groups, the AA, that's a good one. The fast way, just ripping it off, is self-inquiry. Who am I? And cut the I thought at the root. That's what I tell people when I work with them. And they feel such freedom. And you probably feel it from the book. But you just cut the whole thing. You cut Tina Castaldi at the root. And then you don't know who you are. Even for a second. If you don't know who you are for a second, that can be enough to redefine, to recalibrate your whole reality. And then some of us take a new name to represent that. You took Athena, I took Prasad, I've given many names to symbolize that. So that's all awakening is realizing we're not our false self and keeping quiet, and our true self, which is already present, reveals itself to the self.
So when you saw the guy shoot the lasers out of his eyes, and then you sat there and wanted to be noticed,
Oh yeah.
did you get this moment of enlightenment?
No, I forgot. I forgot to tell that story. I got sidetracked on another teaching. Was that, but again, it's a phenomenon. That's why I don't tell it much. That's why I spoke of phenomenon. Remember? That's how I got sidetracked. But what happened was I kept trying to get Papaji to look into my eyes, and he would just do a quick like this, and not give me the juice. Finally, I left. After a few months, I left, and he was giving the juice to other people, especially. He would have enjoyed you. He really loved the goddess, and they were like, oh, he'd look at them and they would just like fall on the ground. But I found out later, he gave a lot of I was in my late 30s when I got there, mid 30s. He gave a lot of us Western men, the fatherly approach, loving but stern at times. So I think that's what was burning my ego up and looking for my father's approval through him because I'd had a challenging relationship with my own father. All of these things, and everyone listening, you have it within your own life, your own story, your own movie. You peel away the layers, that's the slow way, or you cut it at the root. Who am I? And I'm not a disciple, I'm not a guru, I'm not a person. I am that which is the source of all that is.
So when you sat in front of him and you did get the juice, now I've watched many videos on Papa G and people come out, they're laughing and they cannot
Exactly.
speak. They can't speak.
That's exactly right. So people burst into laughter because it's a no mind state. And he leads them through self-inquiry or just through his presence into that no mind state. And in the early days with Prasad, you can even see it in that video you referenced. People burst into laughter there as well, right? It's because through that satsang that I learned from Papa G, it almost deconstructs the mind. And when there's no mind, the laughter rises because you see the insanity of the mind. So, but in Prasad's case, and Papaji gave me the name Prasad, he wouldn't look at me. I left. I went to take care of the Indian children for 6 months, and then I had to come back to extend my visa.
You were doing what with Indian children?
Oh, helping to open clinics and schools and uniforms. And there's a woman there who was and Papaji named Dwaba, who is a powerhouse in children. She's amazing. And so I helped her for like 6 months when she needed, when the person who was supposed to do it lost his visa or something. So again, Papa G's grace sent me there. I did it. Then when I was finished, ready to come back to the United States, I went back to sit with Papa G in Lucknow. And David Godman had written his biography. And David was reading it in front of Papa G. Papa G was just staring at him to give him energy while he was reading the book, because he's a quiet kind of academician, David is. And so I was sitting directly behind David, and Papa G just kind of let his gaze shift from David to me, to my eyes. And everything turned to light and disappeared into bright light and nothingness. And it wasn't even personal. He wasn't talking to me. It wasn't the moment that I was hoping I would receive, that I had seen him give other people. It wasn't even laughter. It was pure light and pure nothingness, which is pure light. And I can't even remember what happened after that, except probably eventually the satsang ended and he got up at the end and walked out of the room, and I did with him. I mean, with everyone else. So that was the moment. But I don't think there's a moment of enlightenment. There are some masters who like to celebrate their enlightenment day, because what happens is when you wake up, you realize you've always been awake. Isn't that your experience?
I'm still seeing little glimpses of it. I don't know if I'm completely inside of the river.
No, no, what I mean is in that moment when you're feeling awake, perhaps when you finish the book, or perhaps now, if you just take a moment and acknowledge your breath or inquire and come back to stillness. In the emptiness of now. Does it not feel that it's always been this way? Once you touch it, that self that you always knew when you were a child, pure and loving, that self who had trouble fitting into the limitations of the human body and the human form, haven't you always been in touch with God?
Yeah, when you have you are love, that's you go into that really in chapter 16. That's where you touch that and all the needs drop away. I In this state I feel not hungry, not thirsty, not horny, not ambitious, not a mother, not a daughter. I just feel full.
It's where emptiness is fullness. It's beautiful. I thought of the name for my next book, The Power of Emptiness. Oh no, excuse me. The Emptiness of Now. I was making fun of Eckhart's book. But the emptiness of now, that's something I feel we just discovered together. That now is empty. Now is the way you feel your fullness is because you're abiding as emptiness. If you're in some identification, there's no fullness and there's no emptiness and there's no room for fullness. Another way of saying it is when you realize you're a nobody, then you don't have to play somebody. You're not attached to being somebody. And so you can be anybody you need to be to meet the situation.
To meet the
I am
moment.
an empty mirror and I can reflect you however is needed. And that's how I think we are in service. I think one of the quotes from the book, because we made it into a meme, and it says, when you wake up, there's nothing left to do except service to others.
And so were the main teachings of your book to be silent and to serve others? Or is it just to love the self?
No, I think that's main teaching is to be silent. The serving others is kind of the after effect of the book. It's the afterglow. My book is not in any way about serving others. It's just what happens when you wake up. It's a natural thing. You don't need to read a book about it when you awake. But no, my book is more about how there is no other. That's non-duality. There is no other. There's just one love, as Bob Marley pointed to, and we are all that one love in many different forms. That's the message of the book. You
Now,
are love. We are all love, one love.
that's so beautiful. I do know, though, when you came back from India, that you did satsang all over the country, and 200-300 people would show up and they would sit with you and you would speak about this and you would sit in it. Then you ran a spiritual center in Venice, and you have even earlier in your life worked in New York with AIDS patients in the AIDS epidemic. And you've also worked with suicide, and you've also worked with the homeless, and you've also planted community gardens, and you were working with orphanage children in India. So your
And
whole
also,
life.
I directed a musical called Revolution that you starred in.
So I mean, so you have used your talents and your gifts as an extension of, I would say, the pen of enlightenment, if there were one, in the
That's
dream.
You know, you asked me about my biography on my website. I never usually dwell in it, but I think I may end up writing a brief memoir or a biography, because after awakening is when it really got interesting. And like you said, I sat in satsang. It was at the same time as Eckhart Tolle was coming up, and I was actually before him. And Adi Shanti, Gangaji was before me, Amachi, the goddesses were there. But, you know, a lot of us were waking up. Now it's totally different. Now, and I knew this 20 years ago when I was teaching, that now many people are waking up, many people are teaching, many millennials are teaching. They were at the church that I ran, that you were a part of. They are here in Costa Rica. A lot of them teach before they're really fully cooked, but that's part of their process. And they're mostly teaching each other, actually. Whereas usually the young people learn from the elders. Papaji was in his 80s when I went to sit with him. But we live in a society that's obsessed with youth. And I'll say it right here on record, because I work with a lot of millennials. Millennials have a special challenge. They came in as indigos, so they have a kind of sensitivity. They do plant medicine. They know sacred geometry. They connect with UFOs. There's a whole plethora of phenomena. But that phenomena takes them out of the emptiness that we're pointing to now, that was my doorway. So I'm not saying one way is right or wrong. I'm saying that they're too fascinated with the external sensory inputs, both in their mind and outside of their mind, to be quiet. And they love to hear themselves talk. They don't listen very much to what I have to say. I
Well,
just listen to them.
one of the I think the challenges, which is just a great, the book points to this challenge and is also optimally, I feel, a solution, is that using the video game analogy in the avatar, they're all distractions: the social media, the shiny sparkly things, the fame, the fortune, Hollywood, anything that's taking you away from that inner peace and silence is part of the labyrinth of your life. And so we're coming up on the hour. I just want to tell
Well,
everybody.
let me just finish one thing about the millennials, is that the ones I'm working with, at least, I'm not generalizing all of them, but many of them are more awake than their parents. This is what I'm getting at. Glimpses, whether it's the medicine or what are the books, or just they come in more awake. Okay, and that's why a lot of them are turning into being yoga teachers and life coaches and shamans and what have you, right? But if you already know it, then you're not in the emptiness of the unknown. So if you know it too soon, it maybe even happened to me when I was a young guru, right, 25 years ago. I had to give it all up and go live this fascinating life that we just referred to, doing all those things you mentioned, as a way to not identify with my own awakening, even just to allow it to be the ordinariness of enlightenment. So what I'm trying to say is to all these millennials, what I find, the way I teach them, is just to be still and silent around them and let the truth come through them. It's another form of satsang. Instead of the teacher talking and the students listening, the teacher is silent and the students talk, and they work out their own truth by being in the presence of someone who's abiding in it.
That leaves me silent. The book is called You Are Love, Awakening to Your True Self. I have purchased, I just, like 4 copies of this. I gave Marvin one yesterday. I read my one on the computer because I can take my computer anywhere. But this one I'm going to be able to highlight because it's not something that um, someone can just read one time, like a narrative, like beginning to end with like a story. You can take each chapter or each paragraph or even one line and sit with it.
That's right.
And so some of the chapters went really slow for me. And other ones were like a rushing river, were cleaning me like I was standing under a Hawaiian waterfall. So this is an incredible book. And it's going to be, there's you know, um, a wonderful thing that you're doing near your birthday. That's coming up in November. People can look
Yeah,
out
we're
for
not
that.
sure about that yet, so I'm not going to announce that yet.
Okay. So,
Let
but
me
you
see
are going
the
to be
inside.
teaching?
Let me see the inside of the book for a second. I've never even seen it. But the inside, like open it halfway. There we go. But say something so you go into close up. I want to see you in close up.
You want to see me with it?
Yeah, there we go.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah, so it came out very spaced out lines. You see, I created the book myself. I did the design, the photograph, the typeface, and so it got very spread out. Did you enjoy reading it in that spacious?
I did, because not only do I like it like this, but when I write, I try to write as I think, like a thought form, and then I want space to let it land, and then another thought form. So I really appreciated this.
I think it's great. And again, that's in choiceless awareness. I just want to say in wrapping up is that as an artist, a writer, filmmaker, which is all that doer, which is all the domain of the dream of the false self, um, I became that perfectionist I told you about. And I wanted to let it go. And here in Costa Rica, I did. And so when I finally decided to publish the book, it was effortless. I just, it took a few tries sometimes of, redoing it a couple times, but it was pretty effortless because I didn't have that critical mind thinking it had to be perfect. There were some typos that still made it through there. It's okay. It was like part of my work was to love myself unconditionally and not let any shame or unworthiness program, like I referred to in the beginning of the book, to somehow get in the way. Any impersonal credit for writing the book, if people think it's great or they don't think it's good, I'm not taking it personally. I've just channeled the book. I'm presenting it to the world. People can read it whenever they're ready to read it. It could be helpful. They could read it long after I drop my body. This book could be around. So I'm on my job. And would you, in finishing, tell everybody what you said to me when you first finished about, like, I can retire? Do you
Yeah,
remember?
I wanted to say that. You're reading my mind right now because I was
Yes,
thinking
yes.
about that. So I said, a lot of people, like, they have this bodhisattva vow where they have to come back again and again and again until every single human being is awakened. But when you read this book and you realize every human being is already you, and that you go into it seeing that they're already fully awake, there's nothing to realize, call off the search, there's no teacher needed, just be silent and abide in the silence. I said, you don't have to do another thing. If this is the only thing that you left behind, you can now go into the oneness and completely merge. And your job has really been appreciated and loved.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. So those of you who would like to enjoy this, I think you can get it either on your website, prasadpaulduffy.com, or Amazon. I bought it on Amazon.
Yeah. Well, the website is a link to Amazon. So either
Oh, okay.
way, you're buying it on Amazon. But if you go to the website first, it's sometimes easier to find.
I'll put that I'll put a link in at the bottom.
Right.
And those of you who are watching, this will also not only be on my Facebook page, but also on YouTube. So please subscribe. And can we do this again? I really feel like I'd like to go my favorite chapters, 6 and
Well,
9.
let me just say what I'd like to announce, because I'm not sure what you were going to announce if I'm going to do that book deal situation yet. But I would like, once more people read the book, that you and I put together a workshop based on the book that would be online, that people could ask their questions and explore together with you and I the chapters of the book.
I would be honored. I'd really be honored. And I just want to let everybody know that this one little tiny miracle, I know we're not supposed to focus on the miracles, but everything's a miracle. And a miracle is a change in consciousness. However, when I changed my home and declared it as a temple, which means I want to honor my body as a temple and this place as a temple to be sacred. And one of my friends said, you don't buy sacred things for yourself. When you're ready, the universe will flow them to you. One of the things that flowed to me, unbeknownst to you, when it flowed here, was that Ramana Maharishi was my teacher since 2006 on the inner. And when you arrived and put that painting in the temple because you stayed here, it was a sign to me that I was going in. I was going in the right direction. So thank you for that.
And we didn't end up meeting in person until 2013. And we had all these mutual friends, and we were like, how did we not meet yet? It's crazy. And then we met at the perfect time. And we're going to continue to do great work together. I feel that. And so thank you for taking the time to talk about the book with me. And thank you, everybody who listened in.
Blessings and light. You are love. You are love. Mwah. And so am I. You're my very self. I love you so much, Prasad. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and blessings and light. Namaste.